Introduction. Have you ever realized that the more you speak, the smaller you become? Not because others are judging you, but because you, with every word you speak, are quietly distorting your own image in your mind. You think you're releasing something, but in truth, you're repeating the wound. You think you're sharing to be understood, but you don't realize that with every retelling of the same old pain, you are reprogramming your mind to live perpetually inside that scar, as if you're not just experiencing the pain once, but reliving it 100 times, each in a different tone. And then that pain, from a memory, becomes part of your identity. You begin to introduce yourself through your wounds. You show up through your failures. You define yourself by what once broke you. And worse, you have no idea that it's happening. The illusion of honesty. We live in an age where being genuine is often confused with saying everything out loud. We're taught that opening up is a path to healing, but no one tells us this. Saying too much, too soon, to the wrong person can turn your pain into your identity. You think you feel lighter by telling everything, but sometimes you're only helping the pain take deeper root. Because every time you speak it out, your brain doesn't know you're retelling. It only knows you're reliving. And it reacts. It rewires. It turns your story into a belief system. And that belief system will shape how you act, how you react, and how you treat yourself. The Stoic way, Stoicism, does not teach us to be silent out of weakness. It teaches us to be silent out of intention, out of awareness, out of knowing that there are things better left unsaid, not because they are too heavy, but because we are not yet strong enough to keep them from controlling us every time we speak them aloud. Stoicism does not fight emotions, but it refuses to be ruled by them. It does not condemn sharing, but it warns. Do not confuse relief with empowering the pain. The line between the two is incredibly thin, and when you speak unconsciously, no one is taking your power away. You're the one laying it down, offering it up to each person in every meaningless conversation. The moment to pause. So today, if you're exhausted from being misunderstood, if you felt like you talk and no one really listens, if you've been repeating the same pain without feeling any better, maybe it's time to stop, not to endure, but to transform, not to hide, but to take control, not to suppress, but to be silent at the right moment in the right way as an act of inner strength, not surrender. The journey ahead. Today I will walk with you through 13 Stoic lessons, not to make you cold, but to help you understand when to speak, when to hold back, and when silence becomes the most powerful declaration of who you are. If you are ready, step into this journey, a journey where silence is no longer emptiness, but the highest expression of inner power. Part 1. The words you say about yourself are orders your mind obeys. Do you know that every time you say, I'm terrible, I'm not good, I'm not enough, you are unconsciously issuing a command straight into your own mind? And the strange thing is, your mind obeys. It doesn't argue. It doesn't question. It simply accepts, stores, and incorporates those words into its operational framework. From that point on, every behavior, reaction, and choice unfolds in a way that aligns with the command you gave. But what's even more striking is this. It's not just your mind that listens. The world listens too. People meeting you for the first time, people who don't yet know who you are, they listen to how you talk about yourself. And from that, they begin forming a profile, a template of who you are. not based on your true nature, but on what you say about yourself. You don't have to boast and you don't have to lie. All it takes is repeating self-diminishing language like, I'm so forgetful, I'm bad at communicating, I'm just not the type who sticks with things. And within minutes, they start believing it's true. And they begin treating you accordingly. A forgetful person, an undisciplined one, a background character in your own conversation. I once witnessed a simple situation that left a lasting impression. It was a casual gathering. A young woman was being introduced to a new group of friends. In the first 10 minutes, she described herself 3 times as someone who's socially awkward, clumsy, usually doesn't have much to say. Whether said in jest, lightly, or even with a smile, it still left a mark. Not long after, people began talking as if she wasn't there, not because they were rude, but because they had unconsciously believed the way she had described herself. And unconsciously, they excluded her from the shared energy of the group. She didn't understand why she felt out of place, but in truth, she had guided them into that narrative through a few seemingly harmless words. Epictetus, one of the most profound Stoic philosophers, once said, "If someone speaks ill of you and it's true, correct yourself. If it's false, laugh." But more frightening than being spoken ill of by others is when the first person to speak ill of you is yourself. No one forces you to diminish yourself, yet you still do. Out of habit, because you think it shows humility, or worse, because you've lived so long in a version of yourself that's smaller than who you truly are, you've come to treat it as default. The Stoics understood something modern society often forgets. Language does not merely describe, it defines. When you use words to describe yourself, you are creating a structural identity. And if you repeatedly use negative descriptions, they become the prison walls that lock you into a role you no longer realize you have the power to walk away from at any moment. No, this isn't a call for you to speak positively about yourself all the time. No one's asking you to be arrogant or sugarcoat reality, but you need to have an acute awareness of every word you say about yourself, because every one of those words is a brick, and you are using those very bricks to build the wall of your self-identity, the wall you'll live within day after day. Choose each word as if you were choosing the foundation of a house you will have to live in for a very long time. Part 2. Real change doesn't ask for an audience. There is a quiet truth that most of us know, but rarely have the courage to live by. The most profound changes are often silent. They don't need a status update, don't need a story, don't need to be seen to feel real. And if you find yourself constantly needing to announce, to share, to seek external recognition to validate something that's happening inside, you probably haven't truly stepped into change yet. You're merely performing. Performing for others, and more dangerously, performing to convince yourself that I'm on the right path. But performance has no roots, and what has no roots cannot last. Have you ever started a new habit, working out, eating healthy, waking up early, reading, meditating, and immediately wanted to post about it on social media? There's nothing wrong with that. But be honest. Why are you posting? To document your journey? Or to receive a few compliments, a few nods of approval, a few emoji reactions to confirm that you're doing great? If it's the latter, then you need to hear this. When you hand your motivation over to an audience, you're also handing over your power. And one day when no one's responding anymore, you'll stop. Not because you don't want to continue, but because you no longer feel seen. I once knew a woman who began to change her life in silence. She didn't tell anyone she had started meditating every morning. She didn't mention that she cut back on sugar, on alcohol, on social media. She didn't say she was learning a new skill every evening. She didn't explain that she was trying to mend a broken relationship with her mother. No one knew. But 6 months later, at a casual gathering, someone looked at her and said, "Something's different about you. You're calmer, brighter, more focused." And when she just smiled, saying nothing, I understood. That was the real sign. It didn't need a caption, no spotlight, no explanation. It was something that had grown in silence and now radiated on its own. Epictetus, a man who once lived in chains, yet never lost the freedom of his mind, said something I believe, if truly understood, will change how you live starting today. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Don't announce that you're changing. Don't explain why you're stepping away from pointless pleasures. Don't justify why you've slowed down, grown quieter, speak less, say no more often. Just live it, because the truth is, if you still need to talk so much about something, you probably haven't lived it long enough for it to speak through you. Some things need protection from outside eyes, not because they're wrong, but because they're not yet strong enough to withstand the storm of judgment. Like a newly sprouted seed, you shouldn't bring it out into the wind and sun just to impress someone. Let it grow roots, a strong stem, life force, and when it rises tall, people will see it without you having to say a word. You don't have to turn your journey into a broadcast. Let it be something sacred, a quiet rebirth, choice by choice, step by steady step. Don't try to say, "I'm changing." Let your silence roar like a declaration. I am living it. Part 3, speak less, start quietly, and let your steps speak for you. We live in an age where it's easy for anyone to say, "I'll start next week," "I'm planning a big project," or "I'm about to change my life completely." But if you pause and look closely, you'll see a rather painful truth. Most of the people who say such things never actually start anything. They talk a lot, make big promises, draft grand plans, but their actions are faint, scattered, or non-existent. Their words sound like background music to a movie that never gets to the main scene. Everything is just a trailer, never the real content. Meanwhile, there's another kind of person. They make no declarations. They don't post a "starting a new journey" update on social media. They don't need applause. They don't need validation. They simply begin, step by step, day by day, quietly, steadily. And then one day when you see them again, you almost don't recognize them. Not because they say, "I've changed," but because you feel it, even if they don't say a word. There's no need for explanation. The way they stand, the way they look, the way they choose and respond speaks for them. Marcus Aurelius, the greatest Roman emperor and one of Stoicism's brightest symbols, once wrote, "Do every act of your life as though it were the very last act of your life." That line is not just an ethical suggestion, it's a way of life, an attitude, a way of confronting the present with full presence, without delay. The Stoics never needed to declare the future. They lived in the present as if there were no second chance, and that's what made them powerful. Many people think speaking about their plans will give them more motivation. They believe, "If I tell enough people, I'll leave myself no way out." But what they don't realize is this: every time you speak of something you haven't done, you're giving yourself a false sense of accomplishment. Your brain can't tell the difference between "I did it" and "I said I would do it." it still releases a bit of dopamine, a small psychological reward that makes you feel like you've made progress. And that very feeling stops you from moving forward because you've already been rewarded before you've earned it. The Stoics understood this clearly. They didn't live by promises, they lived by action. No declarations, no announcements, no need for applause, because they knew words are wind, action is stone. And if you want to build your life on something real, you must learn to be silent and do the work. You must let your results speak on your behalf. I know silence is hard, especially when you're fired up. You want to share. You want to show someone that this time you mean it. But ask yourself again, do you want others to see, or are you trying to convince yourself? If you're truly serious, you won't need to convince. You'll just act. And if someone asks, what are you up to? You can simply smile and say, you'll see. So from today, try something simple. Speak less. Do more. Stop writing pages of plans. Instead, take one small action today, right now. No announcements, no banners, no countdowns. Just move, because steady, silent steps are the most trustworthy voice of who you really are. Part 4. The most important conversation is the one you have with yourself. Do you know what the most important conversation you have each day is? It's not with your boss, not with your loved ones, not on social media. It's the conversation you have with yourself. Silent, unheard. But it's the quiet foundation that shapes every action, every decision, every belief you hold about who you are. And if you're not in control of that voice, then I'm sorry. You're being programmed by a hidden enemy that lives inside your own mind. Have you ever noticed what you say to yourself when you make a mistake? I'm so stupid. I failed again. I'm not good enough. These seemingly harmless statements are, in fact, a toxic script running in the background, constantly overriding your confidence, eroding your self-worth, and silently distorting your image of yourself. Each time you repeat these negative phrases, you're not just blaming yourself. You're establishing a new identity, and that identity slowly becomes your default. Someone who says, I'm bad at communication 5 times a week will, by the end of a year, no longer see any reason to try. Someone who constantly sighs, I have no willpower, won't dare begin any journey longer than 3 days. Someone who repeats, I'm not lovable, will subconsciously sabotage every relationship that starts to grow. Not because the world is cruel, not because fate is unfair, but because the story they've been telling themselves has become a prison. Marcus Aurelius once said something you should write in the palm of your hand. Your happiness depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Pause for a moment and reflect. What is the quality of your thoughts today? Are they mostly filled with worry, criticism, self-blame? Do you spend your day pulling yourself down, replaying failure scripts in your mind as if there's no escape? But you can start small. All it takes is changing one sentence. From I'm terrible, I'm learning. From I always fail, I'm trying again. From I'm not good enough, I'm not there yet, but I'm moving forward. With just one small shift in how you speak to yourself, you'll be surprised at how your inner state begins to change. You no longer see yourself as a fixed, broken, helpless being. You start to see a self that's growing, and that is enough. Stoicism doesn't teach us to deny what we're feeling. It doesn't encourage you to lie to yourself with empty affirmations. But it does stress one thing. Never let unconscious, negative language become your truth, because what you repeat is what you'll believe, and what you believe is what you'll live by, whether it's true or not. Instead of asking, why am I like this? Try saying, I'm learning how to do better. When you make a mistake, instead of blurting out, that was so stupid, take a deep breath and say, this is the lesson I needed. The change may seem small, but the meaning is profound. Because you're no longer a victim of unconscious language, you're actively choosing words that build instead of destroy. From today, start observing how you speak to yourself. Write down the phrases you often use when you fail, feel discouraged, or get hurt. Then rewrite them, truthful but full of forward energy. Repeat that new language enough times until it becomes the new story you tell yourself. A story that doesn't deny your past, but opens the door to your future. Part 5. Every word you speak builds or breaks something. Let me tell you a story that may seem simple, but carries a profound truth. Once upon a time, a group of frogs was traveling through a forest when two of them fell into a deep pit. The rest gathered around the edge, looked down, and almost immediately began shouting, "You won't make it! It's too deep! Don't try! It's useless!" One of the frogs heard this, gave up out of exhaustion, and died in the pit. But the other frog, though it heard the same words, kept jumping, again and again. Each time it fell back down, it pushed itself harder. Eventually it leapt out. The whole group was stunned and asked how it had managed to keep trying when everyone said it was hopeless. Only then did they realize the frog was deaf. It hadn't heard the discouragement. It thought everyone was cheering, and that saved its life. Words, whether spoken to others or to yourself, are arrows. And like all arrows, they have direction, they have a target, they have force. But here's what few people realize. Every time you open your mouth, you're aiming at something in reality. You're either building it up or breaking it down. There is no neutral. Every word creates a ripple, and you can never predict which shore that ripple will wash upon, in someone else's mind, or even your own. One sentence can save a person on the edge. One harsh comment can make someone let go of hope. One well-timed phrase of encouragement can revive a dying dream. And on the flip side, one careless insult, though unintended, can leave a wound that lasts a lifetime. We grossly underestimate the power of words because they're so easy to say. But ease does not equal harmlessness. The Stoics always understood language is a tool of spiritual weight. It's not just for communication, it's a channel of inner strength. Epictetus once taught, first learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak. To him, speaking without understanding the weight of your words was the same as living without responsibility. Because a person with inner discipline does not speak recklessly. They speak rarely, but every time they do, it is to build, to shape, to guide. So if you habitually complain, criticize yourself, or gossip about others as a casual habit, don't be surprised if your life feels increasingly heavy. You're creating a cloud of negativity with the very sounds you send out each day. And here's the twist. Your words don't just vanish. They circle back and reshape the world you live in by making you see everything through the lens you just spoke aloud. You see something awful, you say, this is terrible. You hear yourself and believe it. You act as though life truly is falling apart. And soon everything around you starts to respond to that exact frequency. A loop of reinforcement, triggered by what seemed like an innocent phrase. So from today on, begin to choose your words more carefully. Before you speak, ask yourself, does this sentence build something? Does it bring clarity light, or strength? If it doesn't, perhaps it's better left unsaid. Silence is not always avoidance. Often, it's the highest form of wisdom. When you learn to speak with intention and care, you're doing two things at once: protecting your inner world and sparing unnecessary harm to the world of others. And sometimes your silence itself may be the greatest gift to someone who simply needs to hear the voice within their own soul again. Part 6. You don't need to be understood to be real. Have you ever tried to share something deeply personal, something honest and raw from within, only to be met with an empty stare, a polite nod, or worse, a reply that made you want to shut every door forever? Have you ever felt excited to talk about a spiritual breakthrough, a moment of awakening, a quiet transformation, only to receive indifference, doubt, or a dismissive, "Yeah, everyone goes through that"? If so, then you've already learned a lesson that every wise person eventually discovers. Not everyone will understand what you carry inside, and that's okay. You don't need to be understood in order to be yourself. You don't need a panel to approve you, nor a community to validate you. You don't need anyone's nod before you're allowed to live in alignment with who you truly are. But society has conditioned you to believe otherwise. You were taught that your truth only has value if others agree with it, that your emotions must be acknowledged by others to be legitimate, that your choices must be applauded to be trustworthy. And so you begin to explain. You explain why you're quieter now. You explain why you're stepping back from certain gatherings. You explain why you're no longer excited by the things that once thrilled you. You keep explaining over and over until you're exhausted. And then you realize over-explaining doesn't make others understand you better. It only makes you dependent on their approval. Epictetus once said something brutally honest and worth engraving in your heart. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish. Because growth is a solitary journey, not because you've been abandoned, but because inner transformation often arrives long before others are ready to comprehend it. When you go further, you'll see fewer people walking beside you. When you become quieter, you'll find fewer people truly listening. And when you change direction, you'll face many who doubt you. Don't blame them. Don't force them to understand. That's not within your control. What is within your control is to keep walking without trumpets, without waving, without needing the spotlight. The wise know when to stay silent. They're not desperate to be understood. They don't rely on sympathy to feel whole. They know that the most valuable things often need to be protected in silence, like a seed waiting for its season to grow, not dragged out into the cold just to be admired and then wither. Some things, if shared too soon, will be broken by the cold gaze of those who lack the depth to truly see. So from today on, if someone doesn't understand you, smile. Don't rush to justify. Don't scramble for words. Maybe they're seeing you through an old lens, and you've long since stepped out of that frame. Maybe they're holding on to a past version of you, while you're quietly building a completely new self. And that is perfectly okay. You owe them no explanation. You only need to keep living truthfully, moving forward, and letting time answer on your behalf. Remember this: not everyone has an inner dictionary deep enough to translate the language you're now living. And that's okay. The one person who truly needs to understand you is you. The rest, if they're worthy, will begin to feel it. And if they're not, then your silence is the most respectful way to honor both sides. Part 7. The subtle trap of speaking too soon. There's a strange feeling we've all experienced, the rush of excitement when you declare a big goal. You've just decided to wake up early and exercise every day, or to learn a new skill, or to shift your career path. You share this with a friend or post it on social media, filled with enthusiasm. Responses pour in. Amazing! So proud of you! You got this! You smile. You feel recognized. You feel like you're doing something meaningful. But then, a few days later, the momentum fades. The plan gets postponed. Motivation slips away, and you return to your old patterns. Why? Neuroscience offers a clear explanation. Your brain doesn't distinguish between saying you'll do something and actually doing it. When you share a goal, your brain still releases dopamine, the feel-good hormone. It tricks your natural reward system. You feel as if you have accomplished something before even starting. The problem is, receiving dopamine too early shortens the drive to take real action. You've been rewarded without effort, and that false satisfaction becomes a subtle trap that pulls you away from real commitment. Derek Sivers, a writer, entrepreneur, and advocate of minimalist living, described this perfectly. Talking about your goals too soon can take away the motivation to achieve them. In other words, when you share too early, it's like throwing a party before you've even cooked the main dish. You invite people to admire something that doesn't exist yet, and when they applaud, it suddenly feels like the job's already done. The Stoics understood this over 2,000 years ago. They didn't chase recognition. They didn't act to be praised. They didn't announce their journey when it was still just an idea. They chose action, and that action was done without a backdrop, without a spotlight, without anyone watching. Because to them, virtue is something to be lived, not performed. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself again and again in his journal, live as if each action were your last. Don't talk about it. Don't explain it. Just live it. You must understand this clearly. Sharing is not wrong, but sharing at the wrong time can derail you. When an idea is still young, when a decision is still forming, when a commitment hasn't yet taken root, it's best to stay silent. Let it grow in the shade. Let it take root through action. And once it's strong enough, you won't need to speak. It will speak through you. I once knew a man who changed his life in silence. No posts, no promises, no announcements. He woke up at 5 a.m. every day, studied in the evenings, gradually let go of toxic relationships, improved his health, rebuilt his discipline. After 6 months, people began to notice, there's something different about you. And he just smiled, because real change doesn't need an introduction. It speaks for itself through presence. Starting today, try a simple but powerful strategy. Keep your plans quiet. Act first. Speak later. Save your word for what you've lived. Save your attention for the process that's unfolding. And if someone asks, what are you up to? Say gently, wait and see. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say about a goal is nothing at all. Part 8. The Quiet Power of Listening. Have you ever wondered why we have 2 ears but only 1 mouth? Nature doesn't do anything without reason, and if you look closely, you'll see that this imbalance carries a subtle instruction for how to live. Listen more than you speak, not just out of politeness, but because listening is a form of power, quiet but profound. In a world where everyone is trying to speak louder, the one who chooses silence to listen deeply is often the one who gains true attention. In a noisy room, the loudest voice isn't always the most influential, but the person who listens, who speaks only at the right moment, always makes others pause and listen. Why? because that person doesn't produce noise. They carry weight. I once had a colleague. She was smart, sharp, ambitious, but she had one problem. She didn't know how to listen. In every conversation, she would interrupt, always eager to speak, always waiting for her turn to talk, rather than truly receiving what the other person was sharing. Once someone in our team opened up about losing a loved one. She stayed quiet for 3 seconds, then immediately launched into, "Yeah, I remember when my grandma passed away and I had finals at the same time." No ill intent, but that moment closed the other person off, not because of a lack of empathy, but because they didn't feel heard. The connection broke, not from the wrong words, but from the absence of space for real listening. The Stoics understood this well. Epictetus, who began life as a slave, wasn't allowed to speak much in his youth. He lived in silence, observing, absorbing, reflecting. And those quiet years helped him develop a skill that most modern people are lacking: the power of attention. Listening isn't just being quiet, it's presence, it's awareness, it's an intentional act. It requires you to pause your reactions, set aside your ego, and give your full mental space to the person in front of you. And very few people truly do that. When you listen properly, you don't just understand others. You begin to understand yourself. When you allow someone to finish their thoughts, you're giving yourself the chance to learn something new, instead of just recycling old opinions. And when you let go of the need to have a response, you free yourself from ego's biggest trap, the need to always prove you're right. Imagine yourself in a meeting or an intimate conversation. Everyone's talking over each other. Everyone wants to speak. And you say nothing. You listen. You observe. You ask one simple, sharp question. You don't debate. You don't raise your voice. And do you know what happens? Silence starts to gather around you because you're different. You're not trying to be interesting. You're genuinely interested. And in that interest, you become the center without even trying. That is the inner power of listening. It doesn't need noise. It doesn't crave a spotlight, but it makes you deeper, stronger, and clearer in the eyes of others and in your own. From today, practice something simple. In every conversation, listen 10% more and speak 10% less. Don't interrupt. Don't rush to respond. Let others walk their emotional journey before you offer something truly valuable. And if you find you have nothing worth saying, then silence is the perfect choice. Because when you don't speak, you learn. When you listen, you grow. And when you learn to use words at the right time, they become power. Part 9. The addiction to applause. There's a type of addiction that's surprisingly common in modern society, yet rarely recognized, because it wears the mask of positivity: the addiction to applause, the addiction to praise, the craving for feedback, the need for external validation. It often begins with harmless actions: sharing a small success, posting an update about a positive change, uploading a photo that reflects your effort. But then you start paying attention to how many likes it gets, who's reacting, who's commenting. And before you even realize it, your internal commitment begins to get replaced by external motivation. You no longer act because it feels right. You act to be seen. Science explains this clearly. When you share something and receive recognition, your brain releases dopamine, the chemical of satisfaction. The issue is, dopamine is highly addictive. It makes you want to repeat the behavior, not because of its real value, but because you crave that pleasurable sensation. You begin to depend on other people's reactions to feel like you're on the right path. And from that moment on, you're no longer living from your inner compass. You're performing. Playing the obedient role in a show called Please Approve of Me. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the entire Roman Empire, yet chose to write a journal for himself, not for the world, once wrote a line that makes anyone pause and reflect. True fame is doing something worth remembering without anyone knowing. A worthy action doesn't need an audience. A profound inner transformation doesn't need a status update. A true commitment doesn't need applause. That's why he lived in silence, wrote in silence, reflected in silence. And paradoxically, it is that very silence that made him eternal. Stoicism teaches us a hard truth. The more you need to be recognized, the easier it is to be led away for your own path. When you act because someone is watching, you are no longer free. You become a slave to that gaze. And when no one is watching, you lose direction. You stop. You ask, what's the point if no one knows? That question reveals one thing. You haven't truly committed to what you claim to believe in. You're still performing. I once watched a friend prepare for an important project over the course of 3 months. He shared every step, from planning to rehearsal to the day of presentation. He was praised so much that he no longer felt the need to finish. He received so much dopamine from the encouragement that his internal commitment wore thin. The project was never completed. People forgot, but I didn't. Not because he failed, but because I learned a lesson from it. Real achievement doesn't need the spotlight. It needs endurance in the dark. So if you're on a journey of change, don't be quick to share every step. Ask yourself, am I sharing this because I genuinely want to offer value or because I crave applause? That answer will define your path. If you're doing it for yourself, you'll endure. If you're doing it for attention, you'll burn out quickly. Learn to build in silence. Discipline yourself in silence. Grow in silence. And let your results speak when the time is right. When you truly live something, others will feel it, even if you say nothing. And if no one notices, that's okay, because the first and most important person who needs to notice is you. From today on, dare to act without an audience. Dare to live with depth without applause. Dare to pursue what's right, even if no one is cheering. Because you're not here to be clapped for. You're here to become the strongest version of yourself in silence. Part 10. Trust is earned, not given. Freely. Have you ever trusted someone, opened up with honesty, and ended up regretting it? Have you ever thought, this person will understand me, will keep their word, won't hurt me, only to find them turning away, going silent, or worse, turning your story into gossip? If so, you've learned a costly lesson. Not everyone deserves your trust. We're often taught to be open, be honest, as a guiding principle for good living. But the Stoics take a different view. They are not pessimistic, but deeply realistic. They understand that not everyone is deep enough to receive your truth, and sharing with the wrong person can leave a wound far more painful than prolonged silence. Some things, if kept inside, you can process slowly, but placed in the wrong hands, they don't just hurt, you may lose faith in the entire world. Epictetus once said, test a person before you trust them. A simple sentence, but a doorway into a life of cautious observation and disciplined relationships. He didn't say, don't trust anyone, but rather don't rush. Because real trust isn't built on feelings or promises. It's earned through time, through consistent behavior, through how a person treats others, especially when no one is watching. There's a wonderful story about the Chinese bamboo tree. After planting the seed, you water it, care for it, and wait. But for the first 5 years, all you see is a tiny sprout. Many people give up thinking it isn't growing. But in the 6th year, the bamboo suddenly grows up to 30 meters in just a few weeks. Why? Because in those first 5 years, it wasn't growing upward, it was growing downward. It was laying deep roots, building a strong foundation for its explosive rise. Trust works the same way. It takes time, it takes observation, it takes depth. Don't place your trust in someone just because they seem to get you. Don't hand over the story of your life simply because someone feels approachable. Comfort isn't always the same as trustworthiness. Some people listen, not because they care, but because they're curious. Some nod in empathy, not because they relate, but because they're collecting data. And you won't know the difference until it's too late. Stoics choose to trust not based on words but on actions, not on fleeting intimacy, but on tested moments. If someone can keep another's secret, they might be able to keep yours. If someone speaks ill of a third party in front of you, they might do the same behind your back. The truest measure of trust is how someone behaves when there's nothing to gain. So from today, don't be afraid to hold part of your story back until you're certain the person across from you is strong enough to carry it. Don't feel guilty for not sharing everything. It's not that you're closed off. It's that you're learning to protect the most sacred thing you have, your inner world. And if you're looking for someone to trust, start with yourself. Build a clear personal code. Ask yourself, what kind of person do I consider trustworthy? And then use that answer to observe the world. Slow down. Don't rush connection. The right person won't demand your openness. They'll make you want to open up. Because in this world, sharing is a gift, and you can't offer that gift to everyone. Choose wisely and only when the roots are deep enough. Part 11. Some battles are won in silence. Not every battle needs the clash of swords. Not every journey should be announced in advance. Some changes, if spoken too soon, unintentionally invite doubt, unsolicited opinions, and even other people's fears to enter your process. And once that happens, you stop moving with your own intuition. You start moving under their gaze. You no longer act from your inner truth, but from the fear of being judged. Some battles can only be won in silence. I made this mistake once. I embarked on a major decision, changing careers, stepping into a path no one in my family or circle had ever taken. At first I was certain, but in my eagerness, in my hunger for validation, I shared the idea with a few people. The feedback came quickly. That's too risky. You can't make a living in that field. Just stay where you are. Changing now is reckless. I nodded politely, but inside I began to waver. What was once a clear decision became hesitation. What was once strong conviction turned into self-doubt. Not because I lacked ability, but because I allowed outside voices to drown out my inner voice. The result? I delayed that plan for another year. 1 year, only to return to the same starting point I could have reached long ago, if only I had stayed quiet. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You don't have to turn into your enemy. Stay true to yourself." Sometimes the enemy doesn't come in obvious form. It can be a doubtful glance, a passing comment, a well-meaning piece of advice that carries limiting energy. And when you begin trying to convince everyone that your path is valid, you're doing the opposite of what Stoicism teaches. You're chasing consensus instead of staying grounded in inner integrity. The Stoics understood this well, Not everyone will see what you see. Not because they're bad, but because their vision is different. You see a mountain, they see a steep slope. You see potential, they see risk. And that's okay. The problem arises when you let their perception distort your truth. That's when you lose. Not because your path is wrong, but because you gave up the strength you needed to walk it. True victory, whether it's overcoming yourself, building something new, or healing a wound, doesn't need fireworks. It needs quiet discipline. It needs trust in a process only you fully understand. It needs the courage to remain silent during your most vulnerable stage, the stage of becoming. A seed should not be dug up daily to check if it's growing. It needs dark soil. It needs protection. It needs time. And so do you. If you're entering a phase of transformation, be mindful of whom you share it with. Not because they're harmful, but because you're still tender. And when you're tender, the wrong word at the wrong time can uproot your most fragile belief. From today, learn to protect your inner battles with powerful silence. Don't announce every step. Don't seek validation from those who've never walked the path you're on. Let your actions be your voice. Let your results be your declaration. And let the process be the quiet forge where you refine yourself, without spectacle, but with steady resilience. Because real warriors don't flash their swords in the marketplace. They sharpen them in the dark and draw only when necessary. And for that reason, they never lose, even when no one knows they are fighting. Part 12. The noise that exhausts you isn't always loud. Do you ever feel tired without knowing why? You wake up with a heavy mind. You work but can't focus. You scroll through endless content that feels shallow, yet can't seem to put your phone down. You talk to many people, yet still feel lonely. Each day is full of sound, but lacks real connection. If you see yourself in these words, perhaps you're not just tired, you're exhausted by noise. Not just car horns, messages, or notifications, but spiritual noise. The constant buzz of the outside world seeping into your mind, pulling you away from yourself, making you restless, unanchored, scattered. In a single day, you encounter hundreds of opinions, thousands of data points, and countless expectations. And unless filtered carefully, each of those voices becomes another layer of dust, covering the one voice you're slowly losing touch with, your own. I once heard a small story that has stayed with me ever since. In a monastery up in the mountains, there was an old monk who carried water from a stream at the base of the hill every day to serve the whole temple. He never said a word during that journey. One day a young visitor asked, "Why don't you ask someone else to do this, or at least tell others what you're doing every day?" The monk simply smiled and replied, "If I need to speak for others to see, then I haven't yet fully understood what I'm doing." That answer pierced straight to something every Stoic understands. When you truly know what is right, you don't need to shout it. You only need to live it. And to live something deeply, you must be quiet enough to hear, not hear others, but hear yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Withdraw into yourself." Nowhere can a person find a more peaceful retreat than into their own soul. He was an emperor surrounded by war, politics, and thousands of daily decisions. Yet he insisted on returning inward to silence as a matter of survival. Not to escape, but to clarify. In a world constantly shouting, "Be faster, do more, stand out," you must learn to step out. Not to give up, but to regain balance. You cannot hear clearly if you live in the middle of the marketplace. You cannot know what you truly want if your mind is always pulled by to-dos, must-follows, and should-bes. Have you ever tried sitting still for 30 minutes? No music, no phone, no talking, no journaling, just to hear what your inner voice has to say? At first it's hard. The noise in your head will rise like waves, but be patient. After a few minutes, it begins to calm. Then from beneath those layers, a quiet voice will speak, very softly, but it's real, and it's always been there, waiting for you to be silent enough to listen. Starting today, turn down the noise. Check social media less, reply less, know less. You don't need to stay updated on everything. You don't need to join every conversation. You don't need to offer an opinion on every issue. Choose stillness as a strategy for living, not because you're weak, but because you want to live more deeply, more truthfully, more clearly. Noise scatters you. Silence gathers you. The world may never stop speaking, but you have the power to choose when it's time to truly listen. And when you can finally hear yourself clearly, you'll no longer feel lost, because in that very silence, the path reveals itself. Conclusion: let the change be yours, not for show, but for truth. We've walked through 12 chapters together, from changing how you speak to yourself, to learning the discipline of silence, to withholding trust, withholding words, withholding the need to be seen or heard. And now, if there's only one thing for you to take with you, one truth to absorb and live by, it is this: if you are doing it for yourself, you don't need to say it out loud, because real transformation never begins with a declaration. It doesn't begin with a status that says, I'm going to change. It doesn't live in a post titled A New Chapter of My Life. And it certainly doesn't need public approval. It begins in moments no one sees. When you pull yourself out of bed, even though you're exhausted. When you say no to the familiar temptation. When you sit with your pain instead of running from it. When you read one more page without needing a reward. Silent action is the true beginning of any lasting change. Every announcement, if not backed by inner commitment, is just empty echo. And the person who lives through action doesn't need to shout, because they know whatever is deeply rooted needs no introduction. Seneca, one of the most respected Stoic masters, once wrote, "The reward of a good action is having done it." Pause and reflect on this. If you exercise regularly, eat well, read daily, sleep deeply, live kindly, the greatest reward is not praise or recognition. The reward is a healthier body, a clearer mind, a deeper life. No need for outside confirmation, because something inside you has already transformed. This is what the Stoics called living in accordance with reason and nature. It means living true to what you believe is right, whether or not anyone sees it, agrees with it, or applauds it. When you act from the most awake and grounded part of yourself, you no longer need to explain. You no longer need to prove. You no longer need to perform for the world. And if you still feel the desire to speak, to share, to declare, that's okay. But ask yourself, why am I sharing this? If the answer is, because this is worth sharing, then speak. But if the answer is, so people can see that I'm improving, pause. Because you don't need to prove that you're changing. You only need to continue changing. One day you'll realize true growth makes no noise. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg to be seen to be believed. It simply is. In every choice, in every behavior, in every way you move through life. And when someone asks you, "You seem different lately. What's changed?" you can just smile. No explanation needed. Because the most powerful things don't need to be said. So if you're in the middle of your transformation, hold this as your inner vow. I will live instead of tell. I will act instead of announce. I will let results speak instead of using words to cover the gap where actions haven't yet arrived. I don't need to be seen. I only need to become. And if one day you see someone living quietly, but with a commanding presence, inspiring others not through noise, but through energy, not preaching, but still deeply heard, you'll know This is someone who has chosen intentional silence. And maybe that someone is you. Thank you for reaching the end of this journey. But truly, this is just the beginning. The journey of silence, but awakening. The journey of no need to prove, only the need to be. The journey of doing, not because it's visible, but because it's right. No one else needs to know. You are enough.